Consider supporting ArchaeoSoup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description. Thank you.
Okay, all systems are green. This is dispatch H63AC, Moon Recon Station designation Glean, forward Archaeological Assessment Unit, beginning transmission. Today I would like to present for the Council's consideration and deliberation a theory that's been brewing amongst the moon base archaeological community for a while now, and that is the rise of a particularly potent, potentially even actually rather insidious, religious movement in the late 20th, early 21st centuries. I'm talking, of course, about the rise of the Apple cult, as some people have described it. In the late 20th century, it seems that certain fairly basic, rudimentary computers, certainly by modern standards, were being produced with a small symbol emblazoned on the front. Relatively inobtrusive, not easy necessarily to spot, but very colourful, and therefore I think of significance to those people who really understood the symbol, much as, for example, persecuted religious groups sometimes use secret symbols to communicate to each other. It is possible that what we see at the end of the 20th century is the beginning of a small group who initially are in a minority and who communicate with each other in secret ways to maintain their identity and also a sense, I suppose, of belonging to the cult. Over time, these symbols are actually seen across the globe with increasing frequency. And this certainly picks up speed in the early 21st century, as far as we can tell. And people have a strange relationship with these devices. At this point, these are rudimentary communication devices with touch-enabled screens and this kind of thing. Some basic voice-activated computing as well. And it seems that people are, well, it depends, I think, on their attitude to the cult of Apple, whether they protect the device as an object of devotion, and in so doing perhaps obscure the symbol of the apple, or indeed in some cases it seems that the protection was very deliberately revealing the symbol of the apple, showing it to all who care to look. It's interesting, but certainly you get more blatant use and display of this symbol coinciding with the opening of temple-like structures across the globe. These structures are often in the densest occupation centres. They have very open fronted entrances, seemingly with big windows, lots of light coming in. This is very similar, for example, to Christian cathedrals of the medieval period. And as you enter, you are greeted with something actually which is very similar to the IKEA faith, or the IKEA faith, which I'm sure we'll have to return to at some point in these transmissions. Because you enter into a space which is a vision of a way of living. It's very clean and crisp, and the objects of devotion are on display. And crucially, they're on display seemingly for everyone to interact with. People, no matter their class, their status, their ability to buy into this particular belief system, are seemingly able to access this area and interact with the objects of devotion. At the back of these temples, there is clearly an altar space, and what remains in the digital archive indicates that there were acolytes, or as some of my colleagues have been calling them, apollites, who wore blue robes and who officiated over the ceremonies within, presumably revolving around the exchange of goods and materials in order to have access to these devices. One name has been universal at these temples as seemingly the cult leader, perhaps even a messianic figure, and that is Steve Jobs, or Jobs, actually. Steve Jobs could in fact be a pronunciation, as after all, at this time, employment being seen to be, and seeing others earning a living, earning a way of getting more transactory goods through jobs, was paramount to a great many people. And this actually has been touched on in previous dispatches, where we examined the t-shirt versus the tie-wearing groups of humans. So certainly tie-wearing groups would have appreciated this sort of form of gainful activity, amassing goods to themselves, and therefore they may well have followed Jobs. And maybe this is where the word Jobs comes from Steve himself. Now there are other opinions actually on the purpose of these temples. One scholar, Dr. Murphy, from Station Gander, has suggested that perhaps the symbol of the apple represents moderation, taking one bite at a time and leaving the rest for others. Perhaps this is a charitable faith or cult or religion, however we want to describe it. I think the global nature of this, though, moves it away from being cultic and towards it being more of an organized religion. But of course, we're still finding new evidence every day. Of course, it is possible as well to interpret this moderation and charitable giving and leaving of the rest of the apple for others in the opposite direction, and that is to say that perhaps this is about greed. Everyone wants the apple for themselves, and they don't necessarily require it because they only require one bite, and they can display the apple for others to see. This could be about conspicuous consumption. It could be about conspicuous display, the ability to wait to consume, potentially. These are obviously anthropological concepts that have great antiquity in our field. But no matter the case, I think it's clear that there were frequent changes of devices. It seems that people within the cult regularly changed and often quite dramatically destroyed the previous objects of devotion. We find great piles of these devices, seemingly often minutely damaged or often quite dramatically damaged, at the back, in the Holy of Holies, behind the altar, in the cultic centers, but also we find these in the middens. Of course, we've touched on the great middens of this era as well in a previous dispatch, and these devices turn up there with alarming frequency. People were, frequently, it seems, being drawn to replace their devices. This could have been again linked with this conspicuous consumption, perhaps in order to be in order to maintain favour with the Jobs, with Steve, and also with the Appleites, you had to be seen to be getting the next iteration. The subtle design changes is clear to see, much like a pottery typography. We can see how the device has changed minutely, but frequently over time. It's also worthwhile pointing out, actually, a pet theory of mine linked with this global phenomenon, and that is the use of the cloud. Terminology of rainfall is frequently linked with these devices. We see references to sending information to the cloud, which I find very compelling. Is this a form of prayer? Is this a form of a primitive belief that by offering up digital prayers, I suppose, to the cloud, that the weather may be influenced? Often software on these devices, where we've been able to find fragments of software, will include programs specifically designed to monitor the weather. And of course, at this time, as we're all aware, dramatic weather events were increasing in frequency. Hurricanes, typhoons, forest fires, ice melting, and so on and so forth. So this was a time of climatic shift and change, and certainly a warming period in the history of the planet. And perhaps these people were offering a form of devotion through the device to the clouds, hoping to affect the weather. That's just my theory anyway. That's not necessarily something that I'm ready to publish just yet. But of course, these dispatches for the council are, as much as anything else, an opportunity to stretch our particular ideas and thoughts and theories as far as they can go. Incidentally, any comments that the council can render on this idea of clouds and weather prayers would be very welcome as feedback. One thing that can be said, though, is that the focus on Apple as a symbol is almost certainly not linked with the great scientist Isaac Newton. One of my a misinformed colleague from station Ghana was suggesting that perhaps these people worshipped the notion of gravity because the story of Isaac Newton and the apple falling from the tree and so on and so forth. I think that is wishful thinking. However, we're all open to new ideas, and of course we're all willing and ready to debate those ideas whenever the opportunity arises. Nonetheless, this has been a dispatch for the council's consideration. I'm intrigued as to where these observations about the Apple cult will take us. But for now, this is Moon Recon Station Glean signing off.